Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, hello after lunch. I hope everybody's returned fed, watered, and energetic for the after lunch session. My name is Alexander Evans. I'm a professor in practice in public policy at the LSE and a recovering British diplomat. I was in government for 20 years. And I will be chairing the next hour. And my goodness, do we have an hour for you? So we have an hour that combines our keynote speech from Lord Blunkett, who's very kindly joining us and will speak in a moment. But we also have a really exciting array of quick interventions from effectively the policy ideas competition that the International Longevity Centre has run. So that will flow on from these. So that's basically the frame that we will have. So let me introduce, first of all, the keynote by Lord David Blunkett. Obviously, Lord Blunkett doesn't really need an introduction, does he? But I'm going to give him one anyway, because it would be inappropriate not to. So the Right Honourable Professor Lord Blunkett was awarded a peerage in 2015, but before that, he was the MP for Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough from 1987 and served for 8 years in Tony Blair's cabinet as Education and Employment Secretary, Home Secretary and the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. I think in the civil service that's called all the easy ministerial jobs. He's currently Professor of Politics and Practice at the University of Sheffield, a great city and a great university, chairs the University of Law, is chair of the advisory board to Future Learn, and is involved with numerous charitable organisations locally and nationally. So Lord Blunkett, I'm going to guide you up here, and then the floor is yours, if that's right.
I'll just make sure the dog doesn't trip me up. Long life depends on not being tripped up by dogs. Look, it's self-evident, isn't it? Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks, Alex. It's self-evident that the moment we're born, we start dying. So it's really important that the Longevity Centre is focusing on the whole of our life and not just the final years of our life. And I think that's why it's so important today to throw out a few ideas. You probably won't know, but at the beginning of COVID, I launched a battle against being declared persona non grata and confined forever to my home because I was over 70. I found the attitudes that emerged back in 2020 really, really worrying. Even people who were 67 in the House of Lords were telling us we shouldn't be there when we turned up to debate the emergency legislation. And I just thought, what the hell are we talking about? Why should we have these kind of attitudes in the 21st century? Why should people not be judged as individuals, understanding themselves what they can do and what they can't do? I shared a platform with Professor Carol Black about 4 years ago, and we both agreed that if we had to be at work at 7:30 every morning, commuting in from outside London, or anywhere else for that matter, 5 days a week, we couldn't do it. But we can, if we can persuade people that we can turn up at 9:30 and we can work quite happily into the evening. So we've got to start treating people as individuals. And it was a major battle when I was in government to accept that there would be a retirement pension age, but not an age of retirement and automatic junking into doing your garden, or if you can ride a bike. I can ride a bike, but I need somebody on the front, which makes it very difficult. I can garden, although I'm not terribly good at it. I've had a go at hitting a golf ball, but it wasn't terribly successful. Although there are blind golfers, I wouldn't stand anywhere near them if I were you. And of course, in future, it will be possible for blind people to fly planes. In fact, you could do it now, but I wouldn't recommend it. So we've got to treat each other as individuals, and we've got to think through what is it in life that makes it possible for us to fulfill, both at work and in leisure, the things that we want to do. The most blindingly obvious thing, which you'll have talked about this morning, is income. If you are born into a comfortable, warm home with a loving family, and you're nurtured, and you go to a decent nursery school, And you then develop through the transitions of life into higher education and a reasonably comfortable job, part of which you can work from home. Your chances of longevity increase by the year, and we all know that. So let's take it as read, and then let's examine why it was that people in my city working in the major steel industry and engineering, on average, died 2 years from retirement. Partly because of the nature of their work, partly because when they stopped work, their raison d'etre, their reputation, their self-esteem took a major knock. They were no longer valued. And therefore, one of the things I wanted to get across this afternoon is that we have to value everything that we are doing and value what other people are doing around us. And that can be caring. It can be, as with my wife, who's retired just as a GP, who is completely taken up with her grandchildren and is so glad that I come down to London for part of the week and get out of her hair. And I'm so glad because it gives me a structure and a reason for getting up in the morning. So, like Carol Black, I believe that work of some sort, and it doesn't have to be paid, an activity is absolutely fundamental. And the 1 in 10 people who dropped out of work, who are in quotes of working age, during the pandemic, tells us quite a lot. I mean, the pandemic had pluses and minuses. I won't go into what Boris is saying at the inquiry this morning, although I know Heather Hallett very well, and I wish her well in what a hell of a task. But the plus was we learnt new ways of working. People who could started to understand they could work from home, and that meant that they changed their pattern. Some people have taken the mick. I mean, people always do take the mick, and we have to be clear about managing both our own time and that of other people so that we get the balance right, so that people are getting up and going out and having the structure and getting the exercise and meeting other people and socialising, as well as being able to understand that they can do part of their work in new ways. With the development of robotics and artificial intelligence, this will become much more the norm in the next decade. So we've got to adjust to it. And that does mean people can work part-time. It means that they can change the nature of their jobs and they can progress in work to a point where they start to take control themselves of what they're prepared to do. Now, it may be fairyland when you're on a bike for Deliveroo or you're working for Amazon, you're in an entirely different ballgame, just like the people I grew up with on the council estate in North Sheffield, whose work was determined by others. But the world is changing, and we've got to try and adapt and change with it. It's the poem William Blake, London by William Blake, has a phrase in it which has always caught my attention. He talked about mind-forged manacles, and I see that as the way in which both as individuals we confine ourselves by what we think we can do and how we can do it, and others confine us with those mind-forged manacles in terms of what they think is possible and how we can do it. And the skills paper that I led on for Keir Starmer, which I published a year ago, tries to talk about lifelong learning in a way that really means it all the way through. So every day, Alex, you and I, touching academia, are learning something every day from other people as well as from our studies. And that learning process keeps us alive, so that when people get to a point where the job they're doing is no longer either acceptable to them or feasible in terms of practicalities, as the physical aging process takes place, and sometimes the mental process takes place, there will be activity and hope and engagement and being valued for the future. We tried, when I was Chair of Social Services in Sheffield, before I became leader of the council, to develop entirely new ways of helping people to adapt as ageing took its toll. We developed home warden and home help services. We developed what we then called elderly person support units, which was a whole combination of bungalows and flats with the very earliest, I mean, we're going back a long way now, earliest alarm systems, with a core support system in terms of catering and laundry and the ability to people to meet together in open lounges, and a residential unit for those who needed either temporary respite or were actually going to need constant care. And because, when I left, because the city couldn't afford to spread the initiative right across the area, they stopped doing it. We've got to be able to innovate. We've got to be able to engineer new ways of progressing and supporting each other in whatever ways needed for the future, without being confined, because we can't do it for everyone. But we can spread best practice, and we can ensure that we embed that best practice, and we can give people the inspiration to think differently. And that's why I'm going to confine myself now, because I was given quarter of an hour, to you raising comment or question, and then we'll have the quick fire real ideas about how we're going to make it work. The one thing I'm absolutely certain about is that we've got to take control of technology. If technology takes control of us, and we are an appendage to artificial intelligence, we will die. We'll die inside as well as physically. We'll stop having that raison d'etre for getting up in the morning. And the utopia, which, by the way, Karl Marx talked about, it's worth reading Francis Wheen's biography of Karl Marx. He was eulogizing about how people would work in the morning and then they'd be able to walk in the countryside and read poetry. And one of his acolytes said, "But Karl, who will clean the shoes?" And Karl said, "You will." And it's always the "you will" that we've got to avoid. It will always be someone else who will be wiping our bum. It will somebody else who will wash us when we're very frail. And that someone might be our brother, our sister, our mother, our loved one. And that someone needs valuing. Thank you very much.
Lord Blunkett, thank you very much indeed. That was a powerful reminder about people as well as policies. And I think all too often, some of the thinking about longevity has been very focused on policies minus people, and not factoring in these issues about transition and learning and renewal that underpinned what you said. So I think there's now a chance for some questions from the floor. Who would like to ask a question? I see some hands going up. Perhaps that gentleman there, first of all.
Lord Blunkett, I'd like to ask you a political question. So, I was very shocked recently when I was involved in a demerger of one of Britain's largest companies, and it's got nothing actually to do with the demerger, but the fact that I was working with a team of outsourced specialists. I actually tried to recruit specialists who were older, who had more experience. But what alarmed me was that they were going to be forced to retire at 55 in the same company. I didn't know much about it because I was part of the demerger team. There were lots of people, probably in their 40s and 50s, who were being made redundant. But these people offshore who were outsourced employees didn't have the same terms and conditions as their British counterparts. And yet, in a sense, they're contributing to something which is negative, in a sense, as far as we're concerned in terms of diversity, equality within this country. I'm interested in your comments.
Well, firstly, I obviously there's a massive area But we need to start thinking about offshoring like we think about inward migration. We offshore in order to cut costs, and we don't mind employing someone overseas at whatever time of day on much lower wages and conditions, in order that we don't actually bring people into the country to do that same job. So we've got to link the two concepts together, and there needs to be some understanding, as we were trying to do when we were part of the European Union, about the reciprocal conditions that should exist. It's going to take a long time, because people are benefiting in a short term, benefiting from our outsourcing, because of course they're taking on jobs and earning money that is relative to what others are earning around them, beneficial. So it's a massive challenge. Who's next?
So thank you. I think we've got several hands up. So can I encourage short, punchy questions rather than speeches disguised as questions, which is my cunning thing in academia, of course. The gentleman up there on the side.
Thank you. As short as I can be. The subheading here is, I can't read with my glasses on, Solutions for Longer Lives. Well, can I just suggest that people have talked about healthy lives as opposed to just lives. What about the people who would actually like shorter lives? If they put DNR on the medical record, it'll work for physical stuff, not for mental stuff. We treat pets in this country better than people. I'd like to see this given some airing, please.
Yeah, you mean shorter working lives?
I think probably more focused on euthanasia and assisted dying.
Yeah. Well, we could spend all afternoon on assisted dying. We could spend all afternoon on assisted dying. I think what I would say is that my very close friend, the late Tessa Jowell, talked about dying well when she was dying of a brain tumour. And one of the most powerful speeches in the House of Lords or anywhere else that I've ever heard was the last one she ever made. And I had the honour and the real difficulty of immediately following her. And all of us want to see the end of life handled with dignity and with care and without pain. And that should be our primary objective.
Lord Blunkett, thank you. A question down here at the front, the lady just here. Thanks. And I promise I'm not neglecting the other side of the room. I will come to one of you in a moment.
Hello, Anna Dixon. I would say for the purposes of this question, I am also a Labour Party parliamentary candidate, but I've been on the panel for my background in health and social care. So I just wondered, Lord Blunkett, what advice you would be giving to Liz Kendall, the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions in particular, about what you might have sort of, if you had your time again, do to contribute to ensuring that people have happier, healthier and financially secure longer lives?
Well, firstly, I would say to Liz, have a look at the 2005 paper that we published. It is referenced at the end of the document for this conference, for which I was grateful. Take another look at the work that Adair Turner did, which he reported on to me before I left the Department of Work and Pensions, and which included the very difficult arguments about the formal age of entitlement to the state pension, because that's really what it was about, and auto-enrolment. By the way, it took 7 years to get auto-enrolment in, and we did a tour of the country. We weren't exactly a citizen panel, but we did a tour of the country in 2005, talking to community groups, talking to young people in colleges and universities and apprenticeship trainees about the future, given that their likelihood of having a reasonable income in later life is quantum different to those of us who were born immediately post-war and had the benefit of the retirement programs that were set up in those days, and to think that through in terms of both how they would be able to continue working and what kind of income they would need to survive if they wanted to retire and go around the world or dig their garden or whatever it was they wanted to do. And I found that young people were completely switched off understandably, why would you when you've got everything else going on in your life, from what might happen in 50 years' time? And that conversation between young and old, as well as between ourselves, has to be had, because I think young people really do need to think now. So my advice to Liz is read what we did, because you can learn where we got it wrong as well as where we got it right, and liberate the massive talent that exists in this country, which is currently written off. It does involve connectivity between health, the Department of Work and Pensions, the Department for Education, and Department for Culture, Media and Sport, because culture and sport are pretty crucial to keeping us alive, although if you're a Sheffield Wednesday supporter, that is something of a problem. But we did win on Saturday and I was there. So all of these things need to be joined up, and that is not something that governments do.
Lord Blunkett, thank you very much. We'll have to bring this section to a close here. For those who are have a nerdy interest in the question of pensions reform, any guesses on the first year that there was a cabinet debate about raising the pension age from 65 to 67?
Well, it was probably 1935. What was it?
1952. Every single administration since the 1950s has discussed that at cabinet level. So if you think that the challenge of long-range policy making is, alas, not a new one.
But Alex, am I right in believing that when the state pension was first developed, the presumption was that people would die around the early 60s?
Indeed, not many people, I think, were expected to actually be able to draw it. Lord Blunkett, thank you very much. Please do stay with us if you want, but thanks very much.
I'll go down on the floor and listen to the next session.
Perfect.